It can, but
All
you
right. Peace, family. So welcome to We Charge Colonialism, podcast and book club. I am Kimba, member of the Public Relations Committee.
Peace, everyone. This is Tierney. I am the steering committee chair of We Charge Colonialism.
Good morning, everyone. This is Frank, member of the how to call it, chair for the Political Action Committee. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. It's early in the morning. I'm actually using my computer this week, so let me know if there's any technical issues. It's the first time I'm doing it from my computer, but I just want to appreciate everybody for tuning in to another episode of We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. Just to give everyone a heads up, we're reading from Kwame Nkrumah's Class Struggle, and we're going to be reading from page 14, chapter 2, page 14, class concept, for all those people who want to get prepared for that reading, which will take place in the second half of this show. But we want to start off like we always start off by examining the impacts of colonialism around the world. And we're going to start off with Frank Pabarigani.
Yeah.
What's the news?
The news here is just a follow-up from what we discussed last week about the attempt assassination of the Madagascar President, Andre Joszelino. So there's a new release about the alleged perpetrator. So currently they have like 6 people, and out of the 6, one is French national, and then 2 are both French and Madagascar, and then the other 3 are local. And the reality here is 2 of the 6 suspects were French, have worked in the French military before. So again, this goes to say that it seems that the French are involved, that there's an honor cover thing going in there. There should be FBI or CIA involved in this, because if you have an attempt of an assassination, and out of the 6 suspects, you have 2 suspects who have worked previously with the French military, that speak volume to the issue. And as the story goes as well, the foreigner, the suspect, they use the title of being a businessman, and then using that model and carrying on their assassination attempt. And they use that. They always say they are NGO or they are business people in a sense, because again, as we African people, when we see business people, we welcome them. We don't even ask them, especially when they are foreigner. So they use that because they know that they are not going to be checked. But again, being that the security are on their game in that country, it seems that they are on their game. They were all to deter the incident from happening. But yeah, so that's the new story. So it seems that the French are behind it, because if you have 2 French people who have worked in the military, and at the same time part of the assassination plot, that's bigger volume. So that's the new follow-up. That's the new evidence that came out about the investigation.
Hey, quick question: Are we live right now on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I don't see it on my, but maybe that's just my phone.
I could send it to you.
Yeah, we are live. I just share it as well.
Okay. It's that like I'm on the YouTube, but it's just not showing. Oh, maybe. Okay, we're good. All right. So
always good to make sure.
Indeed. Thanks for bringing this story back up, because I'm still trying to figure out. I want to follow the money, and so it hasn't come out yet. Like we know who's part of this assassination plot, but we already know that there's people who were funding this. It made me think of Haiti. How you have this guy in Florida who who they grabbed as someone who was in collusion with what happened in Haiti. But again, like, where are the resources coming from? And so that's what I'm curious in, and that hasn't come out yet, right?
No, I don't think so. And the issue of how to call it Madagascar, just to add up, again, it says that since in the 60s, when they gained their independence from France, up to now, there have been a lot of coup d'etat, a lot of assassination attempt, and all of those things. So we know exactly what does that mean too. Right after gaining independence, and these things start taking place, and up to now, it's still going on.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say, like, last week you had mentioned how 9 out of 10 of the Madagascar people are living under $2 a day. Like 9 out of 10, that's a significant, number. Even if it was like 5 out of 10, that's a lot. But we're talking about 9 out of 10 people. And so, this is, obviously a country that's still suffering from colonialism, because there are people who are just like living. This is capitalism, though. It's parasitic. They're like people who are literally living off of the lives of the working class and poor. But Tierney, did you want to add something?
No, it's just interesting. That a lot of times we suspect things might be happening, and then whenever you kind of see things come out, it's always a reminder that whenever you have a hunch, you should always go with it. And it's interesting. I think a lot of people think it's more so being about conspiracies, but more often than not, I'm finding that a lot of the hunches that we have, that the colonial powers are behind things, end up becoming true. So this is something we were discussing last week. Obviously, the big thing is that why is it that, isn't it interesting? Like Madagascar, where was the other one? Mali, Haiti, all of them were former colonies of France. And, these people are still facing very, very horrible, destabilized situations, but also like these assassination attempts. And then just an added thing, I was just wondering, like, isn't it kind of interesting that you don't really hear too many assassination attempts outside of the African world, or even like assassinations outside of the African world, like in today's context? I know there has been many, obviously, but like if I heard that the president of Mexico is assassinated, like I was like, oh really? But it seems like whenever these things happen with African people, it's almost like a common thing at this point.
Yeah, and another thing too, to observe with all of these, the few assassination attempts that are taking place, and also just like this struggle for power that is taking place in these countries. It's not like there's a revolutionary struggle that is taking, like these struggles, assassination plots. It's not like this is a people's campaign to take the president or those people in power out of their positions of power. It's like a struggle that's happening within the bourgeois, class, and I think that's something that we have to also, look at and examine. That these are struggles amongst corrupt politicians, because the person who's president of Madagascar right now, like, we can't talk about him in a positive way, saying that he's like really for the people. So would I have felt any kind of way, if he let me not get into that, but
same thing with Haiti, though. I mean, like, I hope, it's funny, like, what our people, like, I think when we see assassination, we're like, oh no, not an African leader. No, this is the United States and everything. But a lot of people like aren't even like understanding that how hated this man was by the Haitian people. So it's just funny. Like we do have to also understand, like you said, these are not revolutionary struggles, which is what, I think should also be the message for our people, is that we can't get excited anytime that there's just a change or a switch in power. Like, we have to look for revolutionary, planned, strategic revolutions. And that's not what this is. That's not something that we've had in a long time. And when it happens, you'll know it happening, because all of a sudden you'll see, all of the Western powers panicking and, trying to demonize the movement and things like that.
Indeed, indeed. So, thanks for bringing us this story. We want to continue to, just observe what's happening in Madagascar because, we understand like those are African people who live over there. Despite the, we understand that there's people of other backgrounds there as well, but, this is an African nation, and what's affecting African people on the continent affects, African and Black people in the rest of the world. So, we want to move on though, because there's more interesting news around the world. Tierney, what you got?
Yeah, so I'm going to touch on the story of Israel joining the African Union. Excuse the background noise. But yeah, so Israel has joined the African Union. I actually spoke about this on my YouTube channel. So, just discussing it again. They're joining the African Union as an observer. Observer status is different from a full member. You're not actually voting in African Union. But it does, it's a symbol of strong diplomatic ties. It's a symbol of the African continent welcoming you in. And also, obviously, it gives you the ability to have more influence over the politics and lobby the African Union for things that are going to be favorable for your country. So some people are saying it's not significant. Observer status is significant. We shouldn't just think, it means nothing. There was a reason why it was so powerful when Muammar Gaddafi, rest in power, drove Israel out of the African Union. That's why it was significant, because it was a telling sign that African leaders were not going to allow this entity that has been openly hostile to African liberation still be able to have influence in African politics. So it's very interesting that, number one, although there are governments, I think, in Africa that have more, you could say some more radical policies, like Eritrea and Zimbabwe. We don't see I feel like a Gaddafi, or we don't see Thomas Sankara, we don't see a Patrice Lumumba. We don't see a huge revolutionary person at this particular time. And it's interesting that at this time, Israel gains membership status in the African Union, which says to me that the atmosphere has drastically changed, even though the conditions are worsening for our people, or the conditions are only getting worse. And so we need, those types of revolutionary leaders. But I think this is also a call to our people that our only hope is organizing and being organized, because number one, you don't want a leader who's going to come from the top and that be your person. Kwame would say revolution does not go from top to bottom, it goes from bottom to top, meaning you don't want the top people ruling the revolution. It's going to be the people on the ground who are going to be organized and from there be able to direct the revolution towards their needs. So we want to look for organization. I think that's just the biggest thing that we have to call for. A lot of times I think on social media, we just get into these modes of just talking and talking and talking, and we're outraged, but there's little conversation about what you actually do to combat things like having Israel and the African Union, because that's an organizational issue. The African Union is an organization that's supposed to hypothetically represent Africa, African people. So that's an organizational issue that now this African organization has allowed an imperialist presence in. So you don't combat organizational issues talking and being outraged. You combat it with organization, more organization. We have to out-organize our oppressors. And that's the only way that we're going to get out of this circumstance. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of thoughts on this one. For one, it's just what is Israel? Because this observer status, it said, was done because Israel can help with the war against terrorism on the African continent, which is something that these Europeans are using and the United States are using as a pretext to go into Africa, and also to help with the coronavirus issue in Africa as well. So, to me, I'm like, what is Israel going to contribute that these other colonial powers that's in Africa are not able to contribute, which we don't want in Africa anyway. but you have China over there. So, I'm just trying to understand that logic. And then, Israel is a settler colonial state. Their continued aggression against Palestine is evidence that they, are not for, oppressed people because they are actually oppressing and exploiting people. They're repressing the people of Palestine as we speak. So, why is this someone? I mean, it tells us a lot even about the leaders of the AU to even want them to be a part of this. But, despite South wanting them to be a part of not to have observer status within the AU. Last point, though, too, is, despite South Africa's contradictions, like or Occupy Zania, do want to, at least give them a big up for even, raising this contradiction with them receiving observer status. You wanted to add something, Frank?
Yeah, I just want to add to what you guys say, especially Tiana mentioned something about Asia as the news go that they cannot vote, but the issue here is I don't think we should focus on the issue of Asia cannot vote. The fact that they are observer, they are major influence. You can still be an observer and you brave, and which of course when it comes, we know that the intensity of these outsider when it comes to braving African leaders. And I believe that is one reason why they put Asia on our committee as an observer committee. Because the reality here is they may not be voting, but they can still brave African leaders to vote in favor of their agenda. That's the reality. That's a fact. So the issue here is when we're talking about decolonization, we are already fighting to decolonize the continent. And then you stay inviting people who colonize the country into the organization that is supposed to represent African people in the decolonization process. So even by Asia alone becoming an observer, it also means NATO is also an observer. It also means Europe is also an observer. Because mind you, these people are working in hands together. So if Asia get anything from that meeting, they're going to pass it on to NATO and they're going to pass it on to Europe. And these people work collectively when it comes to the condition of Africa. Asia was the one that supported apartheid in South Africa. And today, apartheid is still in South Africa. Today, African people are still suffering, are still being oppressed because of these three people: Europe, NATO, and Asia, and the rest of the other, or the Arab nation. So why would we want to involve these people into our decision making? So what is in there that we're going to discuss? What is in there that we're going to discuss that we don't want for Europe or Asia or the Western world or the Arab world to know about us, that what we are planning to do? We cannot do anything. I mean, we cannot communicate because they're going to get everything. So I don't think it's necessary for Asia to become an observer into the AU. Asia is not on the African continent. Asia is not part of Africa. So in the same way, there is no African observer in NATO. There is no African observer in EU. Why would we want to bring these people into our organization? Like, it makes no sense. But again, it seems that these African people or African leaders, when they go into Europe for medical treatment, it seems that they put certain things in them that manipulate their brain, and then their feature look black, but their brain doesn't operate as an African.
I also want to touch on a question that was posted. I see it on the screen from Baruti. It said, can you comment on the Arab countries that are also part of the AU? So, I mean, I think that one thing, obviously, is that the continent of Africa is a continent with people who are not all African at this particular point. I think we have to just understand that that's the reality of the African continent. So what you want to have, in my opinion, is that, number one, if you have African unity, I think that there would probably have to be a certain block of African of the African continent that is going to be focused on issues particular to Africans who are actually ethnically African, the same way that you have the Arab, is it the League of Arab Nations for those, and there are African nations on African continent that are devoted to that. So I think that, that's one thing. It's an organizational thing again. It was that whenever we come together in an organized fashion, that you will probably want to find ways to represent the different factions that exist on the African continent.
Indeed. There's some powerful comments being made. We're gonna move on to the next story. I think we're doing really great on time this week. We're being disciplined this week. So according to the Swiss Federal Court, I'm gonna try to exercise some discipline because there's a lot right here. But according to the Swiss Federal Criminal Court, the corruption destroying the Democratic Republic of Congo is inextricably linked to the UK, Gibraltar, and Switzerland. So this is a story that just came out, but we already know it, and this is it just came out as far as this corruption. It was found also in 2003 that 125 individuals and entities were exercised corrupt practices where they were using resources or bribes. They was using capital to bribe the political officials, the president on down, political officials to gain access to certain resources in that country, where they was laundering money, funneling money. But the point is like out of these, this was in 2003, a UN report, that 0 of those 125 entities and individuals were charged. And this is the point of the story for today, like between 2006 and 2011, under the then President Kabila's rule, they found that $388 million in cash bribes to authorities were made, and where they will receive like cobalt and other minerals in exchange. So these is conflict minerals. And nobody. The next step though was like, who's going to be charged? Like the investigation has been done, people have been identified, but who is going to be charged? And I think like even the bigger issue is just like us understanding that this is just a microcosm of what's happening throughout the continent. Mm-hmm. Because we talk about these stories, you can go back and watch some of even our previous episodes or read the articles on our website. And you'll see like there's stories like this that we talk about throughout the continent where European companies with the backing of the state are going into Africa and exploiting African people of their resources. So, but we got to also understand like the implications of this corruption that's taking place. In 2003, where I just mentioned, there was 2.2 million people that were displaced. Today, that number ranges at 6.6 million people. Also, according to the last mortality report by the International Red Cross in 2008, an estimated 1,100 people were dying each day from this conflict. So I just want to bring it back to how capitalism is parasitic, how these European nations and the United States of America as well are literally living at the expense of the lives of African people. Like people are dying as a result of the building up of this country, being displaced and so forth. And even today, you have 27 million people facing starvation. So there's a lot with this story. I'm trying to remain disciplined and wanted to see if y'all wanted to add anything to this discussion.
The Congo is a hot area because it's the most minerally rich area inside of the continent. And so they've always been under siege. They've always been closely monitored. Any type of movements that could have possibly organized the people have always been destroyed. So that's one of those places that is going to need us, because of the fact that they're so rich, because of the fact that they have so much going for them. The West is always going to try to find ways to undermine their sovereignty. The corruption there is like you mentioned, is basically just a symbol of neocolonial or a result of neocolonialism. Whenever you have all your resources being owned by outsiders, what type of life is that? You know, whenever outside foreign companies have control of your cobalt. And the disturbing thing is that you have all of these multi-billion-dollar corporations that own up the minerals in the Congo. Meanwhile, at the same time, the people are living off of like a few cents a day. That's the worst part of it. So they're literally living on a gold mine while foreign companies are coming in and taking everything from them. So the UK is just one of many that has done these crimes. And so, like you said, it's going to be on us to hold people accountable. I think the United Nations has failed repeatedly to hold colonialism to be a crime, to penalize companies that are exploiting African people, and it has failed because the major powers in the United Nations are controlled by them. I'll be right back. Go ahead, Frank.
You wanted to add something, Frank?
Yeah. You know, the issue here is whenever I come to DRC Congo, the first thing that comes to mind is, where are the human rights advocates? And again, after I asked myself that question, where are the human rights advocates? It also comes to mind that there are no human rights advocates when it comes to the issue of African people. The only time there are human rights advocates when it comes to African people, it means that either the super hand or the power hand or the people that always show themselves as human rights advocates, either their interests in our region are not being protected. And then that's the time they will come in to speak for their interests in the direction of speaking for African people, if to say they are advocating for African people. But in the reality, they are not advocating for African people. They are advocating for their selfish interest, but just using the name African people or the African people that live in that part of the region or in that part of the world. But when it comes to the issues of African people, there are no human rights advocates. We are our own human right, and we are the one to supersede or to talk about our problem and our situation. Because the same people we run onto, the same people that come and tell human rights advocate, are the same people that created the problem we're in today, and are the same people that are still spearheading and holding on to our progress. So why should we always run to them? Why should we always depend on them as if to say they are the true human rights advocate and thing? They don't advocate for us. We have to advocate for ourselves. We don't have to wait for them, especially when it comes to the issue of Congo. Now look at this new evidence or this news that just came out about Great Britain being involved in the issue of DRC Congo, that a court in another part of the world have charging or have ruled them to beat the issue in that part of the world. And Tiani there says something up to now, UN are not saying something, anything. How will UN even say something? I believe in 2012, 2013, there was a truck filled of load of mineral resources that worth billions of dollars. And that truck had an accident. And that truck was a UN truck, rating on it a UN truck. So this UN truck were exporting raw material from DRC Congo to another area to be put into a plane and then airlifted, and the UN truck had an accident. So UN in itself supposed to be prosecuted. The war army or the war, how they call it, organization that's supposed to seek human rights or that's supposed to seek peace. But this is an organization in DRC Congo exploiting mineral resources, stealing resources and running away from aid. But again, the question goes to say, when it comes to African people, there are no human rights advocates.
I appreciate that, and I think like as African people, just talking about us, our holding ourselves accountable in the diaspora, being in close proximity to the colonizer. We have to look at even our own privilege, being able to benefit at the expense of African people on the continent who are being stripped and exploited for their, land being exploited, people being exploited for their resources and their labor. Because even with all that we go through in the diaspora, we relatively are able to benefit from the prices um, uh, of these resources and the technology that is being developed through the resources that are being extracted from Africa. So, that's one point I want us to like really to consider, and then also, for everyone to like really consider the system that is in place. Like it's not even putting a name on it. We could talk about capitalism all day, but let's just talk about systems. Like there's just a system that's in place that perpetuates poverty in Madagascar. As we talked about, 9 out of 10 people living on less than $2 a day. There needs to be a complete transformation of that system and the global system that allows this to continue on, or this is going to continue on for the next 100 years. And so there has to be a systemic change, and this is why revolution is so important. I see Tyranny is handling her business. But I just want to also, just want to encourage everybody to go to wechargecolonialism.org. Check out the website, check out the articles that's being written on there, check out our videos. Everybody is contributing in some form of fashion that's on this platform, but also in part the people who are part of this organization. And this is why we want to encourage everybody that's viewing to join. If you haven't joined, send us an email at info@wechargecolonialism.org because we already know like strength is in numbers, and it makes this work a lot more easier the more hands that we have on deck. So if you're not a member and you think that you can contribute to the liberation or decolonization of African people, definitely send us an email and we can let you know how you can get involved. There is no also, but go to page 17 because that's where we're going to start reading from. We're doing chapter 2, class concept. Before I get started, though, did anybody want to add any last words, or is there anything coming up that I'm missing? I know we have like a clubhouse.
Yeah, Frank, on the 21st, right? You want to just
the 21st.
Okay. Well, we can hit that at the end. We can go right into the read. So again, page 17, class concept. We're going to do this read and also discuss. So everybody, we encourage you to follow along. And this is from Class Struggle, Kwame Nkrumah, for those who are just joining. So class struggle is a fundamental theme of recorded history. In every non-socialist society, there are two main categories of class: the ruling class or classes, and the subject class or classes. The ruling class possesses the major instruments of economic production and distribution and the means of establishing its political dominance, while the subject class serves the interests of the ruling class and is politically, economically, and socially dominated by it. There is a conflict between the ruling class and the exploited class. The nature and cause of the conflict is influenced by the development of productive forces. That is, in any given class formation, whether it be feudalism, capitalism, or any other type of society, the institutions and ideas associated with it arise from the level of productive forces and the mode of production. The moment private ownership of the means of production appears and capitalists start exploiting workers, the capitalists become a bourgeois class, the exploited workers a working class. For in the final analysis, a class is nothing more than the sum total of individuals bound together by certain interests, which as a class they try to preserve and protect. Every form of political power, whether parliamentary, multi-party, one-party, or open military dictatorship, reflects the interests of a certain class or classes in society. In socialist states, the government represents workers and peasants. In capitalist states, the government represents the exploited class. The state then is the expression of the domination of one class over other classes. Similarly, political parties represent the existence of different classes. It might be assumed from this that a single party state denotes classlessness, but this is not necessarily the case. It only applies if the state represents political power held by the people. In many states where two or more political parties exist, and where there are sharp class cleavages, there is to all intents and purposes government by a single party. In the case of the United States of America, for example, Republican and Democratic parties may be said to be in fact a single party in that they represent a single class, the property class. In Britain, there is in practice little difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. The Labour Party, founded to promote the interests of the working class, has in fact developed into a bourgeois-oriented party. Both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party are therefore expressions of the bourgeoisie and reflect its ideology. Did we want to discuss anything before I move forward? Because I think like this.
We could pause. You can pause. You have something to say?
Yeah, I appreciate this. The opening of this, because we're getting into this distinction between the ruling class and the subject class. And also, like, I like how you said class or classes, because the way that I take it, like within even the ruling class and the subject classes, that there are distinctions within those classes, because there's people who are within the ruling class that don't necessarily own the means of production, and so we have to also like make that distinction when we're talking about the bourgeoisie. Or at least from my understanding, like the bourgeoisie, you have the bourgeoisie and the petty bourgeoisie. And so, understanding the difference between somebody who owns the means of production and those, business owners, that like small business owners, or even like CEOs of these Fortune 500 companies and so forth. But understanding that they all serve or represent a particular class interest. And also, like within this too, when we're talking about the, he had mentioned how the subject class serves the interests of the ruling class. And we do this consciously or unconsciously, but I think like that's something that we have to examine, because every day that we go to work, and we produce, and on the job, we're producing the value for the products through our labor. And we have to understand that everything that we producing, we don't own. That's owned by the ruling class. And it says, so all of the work that we're doing within the society is serving their interests. And so that's why it's important that we understand that, we're supposed to be serving our own interests. So as the subjective class, in this system, the point of revolution is to turn the system upside down, where the subjective class becomes the ruling class. So the working class becomes the ruling class. But I don't know, Frank, you wanted to add something?
Let me just add something quickly to where he talked about the ruling class or classes. I think the ruling class is just the ruling class or classes. In between there, it's just telling us actually who controls the means of production, who control the means of resources, and who control the means of distribution, all of those things. And when he said the ruling class or the classes, he's trying to distinguish something within there, in that at first, when we were leaving slavery and we were leaving colonialism, coming into independent, all those things, we have basically one class, which is the class he talked about. And then when he's the ruling class, and then when he talked about classes again, now after independence and after slavery, and some black people start climbing the ladder, and as they climb the ladder, and then they form part of the ruling class there, and they are called what? The classes. In between there, now they do not have voice, even though they have money. They do not control anything, because they do not control the means of production. Although they have money, they are working for the elite class in there and getting good pay. So in a sense, they are part of the elite class. But just because they are getting good pay and getting some millions of $1,000, that doesn't mean they also have power. They are also in there working for the elite class. And then it go kind of down the line, down the chain, and then going all the way to, where to the bottom, where we found ourselves in thing today. So yeah, I just want to clarify that. So that's why you see some black people into position of power and got money, but they don't do anything because even though they have money, but they do not control, they do not make decision.
Yes, and I also want to add, so on the issue of political parties, I think that's very important that what he pointed out. We're told, for example, like that countries that have one political party, that is undemocratic. But if you think about it, the Republicans and the Democrats, they are one party. You know, they're one party with certain differences as far as how they would like to maintain their power. Some would like to maintain their power while giving a little bit more to the people who are middle class. The other one wants to just give a lot more to the ruling class. So they have different ways that they try to different ways they try to rule and have power, but the differences are really not that much. They're still privileged people. They still want to ensure that, like you said, the means of production are owned by a few, and they still have an agenda that sees the disenfranchisement of African people and indigenous people all over the world really as being essential to meeting their interests. So whenever you think about a single state party that says, well, we're going to try to represent everyone's interests versus having like a two-party system or a three-party system, four-party system, where they're still focused on upholding the rights of the privileged class, of the bourgeoisie class, you understand that this whole democracy is one way thing is actually completely it goes against the whole message. If the message is representative, then you don't need necessarily to have a Democrat and Republican to be representative. So I think it's just a way to challenge how we consider politics and what we consider representative politics and what we consider good politics, particularly for African people. Because I feel like the multi-party democracy in Africa has just been in shambles. Like everything that they try to do from the West in Africa, it just happens worse than it even happens here. It doesn't work in the United States, so it certainly doesn't work inside of African countries.
Yeah, to add to that point, I think that's a great point because the point he's making as far as like the two parties, whether it's two or three parties, like the two parties in the United States are representing the property class at the end of the day. And when you look at historically too in the United States, where there was one party, there was a one party system at one time, but there was sectionalism within the Democratic Party, not the Democratic Party we know of today, but during that time within the Democratic Party, you had sectionalism, and that's where you had this split and the creation of another party, the Whig Party. And then later on down the line, though, you have this conflict between the ruling class of both of these parties. So it was in their interest to find allies within the oppressed or subjected class within the United States of America. And so this is how the Republican Party was formed. It was this allyship between the ruling class and the working class within this country to go against the Democratic Party of the South. But last quick point too is within like the white subjected class, because that's something within the United States we're dealing with racism as well. And so within what you have white people who are a part of the subjected class, the class that is being exploited, but because that they have this privilege in their relationship with white people, with their relationship with other white people, that they're able to benefit at the expense of Black exploited and subjected people in this country. And so white people, because of this privilege that they have, there's possibilities for them to easier climb the social ladder than it is for other oppressed people. And so and that legitimizes the system of exploitation. But I know I took a lot of time. I'm gonna move on to the next paragraph. So where am I at? Okay, inequality can only be ended by the abolition of classes. The division between those who plan, organize, and manage and those who actually perform the manual labor continually recreates the class system. The individual usually finds it very difficult, if not impossible, to break out of the sphere of life into which he is born. And even where there is equality of opportunity, the underlying assumption of inequality remains, where the purpose of opportunity is to aspire to a higher level in a stratified society. Very interesting. A ruling class is cohesive and conscious of itself as a class. It has objective interests, is aware of its position and the threat posed to it opposed to its continued dominance by the rising tide of working class revolt. In Africa, the ruling class account for approximately only 1% of the population. Some 80 to 90% of the population consists of peasants and agricultural laborers. Urban and industrial workers represent about 5%. Yet because of the presence of foreigners and foreign interests, class struggle in African society has been blurred. Conflicts between the African peoples and the interests of neo-colonialism, colonialism, imperialism, and settler regimes has concealed all other contradictory forces. This explains to some extent why class or vanguard parties have been so long emerging in Africa. Broadly, the existing class pattern of African society may be shown as following. Classes, you have peasants, proletariat, petty bourgeoisie, urban. Well, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go over that. Sure, there's too much going on in there. But I do want to say though that I think like when he's mentioning how the ruling class, like they have this class consciousness, like they understand that that they are one. They have a single interest. With the working class, with the exploited class, there is this division because you have people who are serving the interests of the ruling class. Like they don't understand that they have a class interest or need to develop a class consciousness and overthrow the system that's exploiting them. So it's kind of like this aspiration to be a part of the ruling class that legitimizes the system and keeps the system going. I'll continue reading. So the uneven economic development of Africa has made for a variety of class patterns and wide differences existing between the areas of white settler minority governments, the few remaining colonial enclaves, and independent Africa. For example, in Rhodesia, 4 million Africans are crowded into less than half the land acreage of the country. In other words, more than half the land is in the hands of some 500,000 white settlers. This state of affairs has resulted in an enormous social and political gulf between the rich white estate owners and the impoverished, politically impotent African peasants and workers. Here, as in all settler areas, class is a race issue first and foremost. The haves are whites, the have-nots are black, and all the usual arguments, the myth of racial inferiority, the need for government by the most able, and so on, are used to justify perpetuation of the enforced racialist settler arrangement. Again, in Francophone Africa, social patterns have resulted in the emergence of class divisions peculiar to this particular colonized area. There were the citoyens, the French colons, or citizens. There were the assimiles, the color mulattoes, and the black intelligentsia, or those Africans who worked their way to this class through the army or the bureaucracy. Then came the subjects, the workers and peasants. An assimile could become a citoyen, but a sujet could not unless he first worked his way into the assimile class. This type of social system operated in all the French colonies. Analogous arrangements still exist in the few remaining Spanish and Portuguese territories in Africa. That was a lot of French words, right? I felt like my French was like terrible just now. Did we want to stop here and discuss?
We can. I did want to make a point earlier. You were discussing how there's the rich class, the bourgeoisie class. They're very aware of class consciousness, and I think that something not just on that, but they're aware that if we are no longer in the position that we're in, that they can no longer occupy the position that they have. And that's something that's very important for us to keep in mind, because as we as African people start asserting the right to self-determination, we have to understand that these people who many times pretend to be our friends and pretend to be for things like abstract, like equality, representation, stuff like that, they have a real sense that sovereignty for African people would mean destruction of their civilization and destruction of their position in the world. So that's something that we should always keep in mind whenever we have these politicians coming and selling us dreams, that they're trying to protect their interests. Same with the corporations. They're trying to protect their interests. They're constantly trying to protect their interests. And if we as African people are not aware that this is warfare whenever you're talking about sovereignty, this is, not a passive act. Asking for true freedom is not passive. It's actually something that goes in direct conflict to everything that the society we are a part of stands for. So I think that's just an important thing to understand, that while they're aware of the class struggle, we have to be even more aware of the class struggle and what it actually entails to assert your sovereignty.
Yeah, I think like earlier too, in the reading when he had mentioned how lines are blurred as a result of colonialism, imperialism. He talked about neo-colonialism as well. This is like the neo-colonialism is I think like that's what makes it a lot more difficult to sort of expose these contradictions within society, because I know in our conversations we talk about, or in our discussions, we talk about this need for African people to, overturn this system and so forth. But and then when we talk about European, the atrocities that Europeans are committing, white people in general are committing against African people. But then, when we talk about neo-colonialism, though, we have to understand that there are Black people, there's white power and Black face. We have Black people who are in these positions of power that gives legitimacy to a system that is causing misery for millions of Africans around the world. And so and so we have to understand like they're part of the problem too. And so this struggle is not just against white forces, but it's also against these Black or African forces who are working with the colonizer. But Frank, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to add to it, what I got from this reading, and it's very clear. Nkrumah make it clear in this part of the paragraph or passage that you read. He make it very clear that, look, listen, when it comes to the European or the Caucasian or the white men that oppress you, they have an objective interest, and they try by all means to protect that interest. Yet they may have differences, but when it comes to the situation you're in, they come together. And we see that time to time when it comes to Europe or how do you call it, trying to ally with the United States or with NATO. And then you can see that time to time where Macron have begged his counterpart when it comes to Africa, beg them for them to come together, beg them for them to dissolve certain things in Europe, and then come together so that they cannot lose Africa. He have begged his counterpart to come together to fight or to combat China presence in Africa, because they know somehow China is not going to ally with them, because China too have her own objective and being a superpower too, where she is right now. And they know that China have resisted them before. So they know that China will not go and ally with them. So you can see how the Europeans have passed on their messages on how to collaborate, even though with their differences, because at the end of the day, they all are benefiting from Africa. And at the end of the day, with Africa, they are going to be put in a certain position. So why would they want to be put in that position if they can collaborate, if they can unite? So Nkrumah is telling us here to look, your enemies are united. You have to unite as well to defeat your enemy.
Just to also drive this towards We Charge Colonialism's purpose, African people, we should just be thinking actively. Whenever African people, oh gosh, one second.
Hey, we have to put him on the platform.
I know, but whenever African people start asserting sovereignty and dominance, what happens for us who have a stake inside of this system? Because as you said, Ikemba, there's a lot of white power in blackface, which means that there's a lot of us who have bought into this system and bought into the idea that this system is something that's going to always be there for us. We should understand that it's not.
Yeah, indeed. Did we want to, but before we make any announcements, were there any last words? And then I want to go into announcements.
Are there any questions in the chat?
That's a good question.
Yes. Okay.
And I want to appreciate everybody too that continues to come on and be a part of these discussions, because we're here every Saturday, 10. There's a question. You wanted to read off a question?
No, I don't see any. So I think. Oh wait, can you provide any tangible solutions towards empowerment for African diasporans in the U.S.? What do you guys have on that?
Yeah, I mean. Man, it's broad. I guess like one of the things, I would say is definitely like joint organization, join We Charge Colonialism, and there's things that are happening behind the scenes as far as like organizing with other Pan-African organizations to sort of take a collective effort at addressing these problems of African people here in the United States, but also in the diaspora. So just getting more and more of our people to join organization, but also just like putting these theories into practice. So I know he said something tangible, but just like, tangible, one of the tangible things though is first like joining an organization and being a part of these meetings where we're discussing solutions. So, I don't know, Frank, you want to?
Yeah, just to add to that of the chantable, the reality here is like Kwame Nkrumah said, whether you are from the north, whether you are from the east, whether you are from the south, we are African, period. That's the only tangible solution I can give you. We are African, period. That means we have to work together, we have to unite. Because at the end of the day, the issue that is oppressing African in Africa, it is the same thing oppressing African out of the continent. It is the same force. And those forces are united. They may not be living in Europe. They may not be living in America. They may not be living other places, but they are all united. When it comes to NATO, when it comes to the European Union, when it comes to Asia or the Zionists, they are all united. But they don't live in the same place. They are all united because they all have one interest. They all have one goal. So it is the same way in our tangible reasons that you are searching for. We are African, period. No matter where you live, we have to unite. We have to come together to fight for what belongs to us, to fight for our resources, to fight for our dignity. If African on the continent do not have dignity, or their dignity are being tampered with, it is the same way. Your dignity as well, anywhere it is tampered with, it is being dehumanizing things. So if you don't have respect in Europe, Africa on the continent not going to have respect and all over. So we have to come together to fight together.
I think you guys hit it on the head. It's funny, like I watch a lot of Kwame Ture lectures and everything, and like anytime anyone ever asks him like what should we be doing, he says join the organization, get organized. You can tell like in the audience they're probably like, no, we want something more specific and more concrete, but we don't understand that's literally what we need. Frank said something, so I'll just say it some more. So he said NATO. United Nations, the IMF, World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the U.S. aid, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I'm just listing, organizations by the oppressor. If you want empowerment, you have to out-organize all of those things I just listed. If you can't out-organize it, then there's no such thing as empowerment. And out-organizing it doesn't mean creating a replica. It means creating something that's reflective of the conditions of the people, because the conditions are worsening, and that creates the opportunity for us to make organizations that are directly targeted to what we're dealing with. So don't think organization isn't concrete. It's very concrete. It's in case anyone's like, well, that's not really something, that's an easy solution. It's the only solution. So until we make that our number one priority, there's empowerment. It's really no point of even talking about
it. Yeah, most definitely. So, again, just encouraging everybody that views our show to become a member, because I'm gonna say like Tierney, I know Frank, constantly like working behind the scenes, coming up with like programs and like solutions, like tangible solutions. And so, I see it in real time, and but I see how we need more hands on deck as well, so I know Tierney and Frank is the work that you guys put in. I know y'all like, yo, join so we can get this this work done. And so so just join the organization. Give us shoot us an email, info@wechargecolonialism.org, and trust me, like, there's work to be done. So we'll find something for you to do. So I want to appreciate everybody for tuning in. We're here every Saturday.
And Frank, you gotta be on it. Go ahead and announce your program.
How to call it on the 21st, around 12 p.m. Eastern time, right? Right after the show.
So just say the 21st for now. We'll talk about the time.
Okay, the 21st for now. Okay, so on the 21st, we will be coming out with another very, very brilliant discussion about Africa and African people around the world. And the topic for that day is going to be the effect of globalism on Africa and also neocolonialism. So we want you to come and participate. We want you to come and contribute. We want you to come with your solution, with your answer, with what you know, and come and tell African worldwide of if African people or Africa in general have benefit or have any benefit from globalization. So we want you to come and tell us what you think, what are the effects of globalization on Africa and neocolonialism as well. So come and join or let's discuss African people.
And that will be on our Clubhouse. I don't have the link on me right now, but if you guys watch our social media, it will be on there. 21st.
Hey, yeah, and we're moving into Black August tomorrow. So, everybody keep it black power, and making sure we find some way to recognize, commemorate the many things that happened in the month of August, from the Haitian Revolution to the uprising in Attica. I can go on Emancipation Day, your born day. So definitely recognize Black August, and until next week, 10 a.m., same place, same time. So peace.